Welcome back. You're watching News 9. This is the weekly brief. And the question that we were really grappling with in the newsroom this week was that is there a story similar to Mario Puzo's Godfather playing out in the world? And we discovered perhaps not one, there are many such stories playing out. So the question really is, who is the real Godfather this year in the world of geopolitics, geoeconomics, and arm twisting, bullying, some would call it as well? I think the obvious imagination sort of ends at Donald Trump, flexing his muscle, flexing his economic weight, his tariffs, and whatever not.
Yes.
But why we chose this Godfather subject was also because of what we've seen happen in the US historically, but more so of late. Charlie Kirk shot dead. Donald Trump survived two assassination attempts. And all of this makes you believe, hey, what world are we living in? Gun control happens to be a big problem in the US. But it's not just the problem of gun control, because at one point there was a lobby which suggested that Republicans are the folks who are in favor of guns being widely sold in the US. But
Absolutely.
look at the two candidates who have been attacked. It happens to be Donald Trump in his run-up to the election campaigns, in fact, during his election campaigns twice, and one of his ardent allies, 31-year-old Charlie Kirk. And it pretty much seems like a situation where Donald Trump, not just by what is happening by way of these assassinations in the US or attempts for assassination, also in terms of the line made popular in the Godfather series, make me an offer I can't refuse. This is Donald Trump flexing his economic muscle on the world. Is Godfather, or is Donald Trump the real Godfather as you see him today?
Well, I think, it's a nice coinage, whoever did it in the newsroom. It brings into focus the real power struggle at the global level. But I would imagine that, Donald Trump, to begin, I borrow from a very typical Hindi phrase, jiski lathi uski bhains.
Right.
So, which is quite relevant with Donald Trump, but there is Putin, there is, the Chinese establishment. These are three pillars who are the right contenders. Let's be frank and, be objective. POTUS means power.
Right.
You remove the name. POTUS itself signifies enormous and unprecedented power. So when you attach Donald Trump as the name to that, it gets into an uncertain zone, unexpected, cyclical, yet extremely revengeful. So that is what defines Donald Trump. But also, before we pass a judgment on him, he's also known for taco. He's also not sure about what offer. If I quote from Godfather, he's not sure what the offer is.
Right.
Look at the relationship with Brazil, India, Russia. He at one day is wooing Russia, the next day is abusing him.
Right.
China. So in that sense, it is also a sign of vacillation. Vacillation doesn't lead to power and stability.
I agree with you. So Donald Trump, acting like Don Corleone, pretty much wants everything done his way, does not want to relent, does not want to give even an inch, and is really upset if things don't go his way, and he makes absolutely no bones about showing it publicly, humiliating countries publicly, and then coming around, which is very unlike Don Corleone.
So, Karthik, what we have to understand is that the global Godfather moniker by default belongs to the US president.
Right.
Because of the largest military, largest economy, most innovative country, blah, 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 whatever reasons. But under Donald Trump, it has come into sharper relief because it goes with his personality as well. Mm-hmm. He's a pugnacious man. He doesn't, balk at fights.
Right.
He's willing to pick up fights with allies, with his enemies, anyone, just about anyone, to just get his way done.
True.
What has caused, I think, some amount of confusion, even for his allies and enemies, would be the fact that, like Rakesh mentioned, taco. So a certain win that he brings into global policy making, he'll say something, cycle back from that,
right,
say the same thing again next day. So this uncertainty which he has created in his style of governance, of his global diplomacy, I think that has allowed certain challenges to emerge. For example, we talked about Putin. Right? If Putin, one of the things President Trump said when he came to power is that I'll end the Russia-Ukraine
war in 24 hours.
Yes, in one day. Now, it's been January to now, it's been like several months,
right,
so there's no sign of the war ending.
And that's when they're talking. He's continuously at the theme.
Correct.
He hasn't abandoned the project.
And talking to both parties involved.
Absolutely.
And pretty much
abusing India also of, fueling the war.
Absolutely.
And so, exactly the point, right? Ukraine president comes into White House, he gets a dressing down from how he looks, how he's dressed, to what he says in the crowd. if you really want to put pressure on Putin, that's not how you treat Zelensky.
Yes,
That's right.
Right?
Yes, yes.
So if you have a consistency in your approach and your policy, I think the signal going out to people like Putin would be much more consistent.
Yes.
But that unfortunately is not happening because there are too many moving pieces
You're
and there's
right.
too much of going back and forth in terms of messaging.
Right. So I think we can all agree that the only thing consistent about Donald Trump is inconsistency.
Absolutely.
And I think that is something that the world is living with, has been living with since Jan. It's been 9 months, will continue to live with perhaps until at least, the midterm elections and God knows where it goes.
And
from
Karthi, I think that's by design. It's a conscious part of his global, engagement strategy
Yeah.
that he wants people to be guessing all the time. For example, one day he
But
tweets
that
saying,
can't go on for
he
5
tweets
years,
saying
he has a
that
4-year
Modi is my
term.
best friend.
No,
Then
that's right.
next day he's talking to you about can we,
No.
slap additional.
These are like-
My
tariff
best
on-
friend is a Maharaja of tariffs. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, do you go around
Exactly.
spreading
This
that
could be
message?
the opening shots now into 8th month or 9th month. You can't be talking like that.
Exactly.
No, but if it's part of your personality as a,
So,
a man,
it doesn't
then it's
do
really
him
hard to
any
change
good.
that.
There's a lot of growing resentment against Trump. So in that sense, that's a point that goes against him.
Right.
There isn't as much resentment against Putin.
But again, what you see from the Trump administration is Trump says something else, and you have Peter Navarro saying something else, Scott Bessent saying
No,
something
that's part of
completely
design.
different,
No,
J.D.
that's
Vance
part of
saying
design.
something
No,
else.
that's good cop, bad cop.
Good cop, bad cop on the same platform, communicating to the same people, not coming across as a united administration,
That's
wanting
right.
the same thing from the
No,
deal.
that's why there is a very inherent kind of a feeling which is growing but not public.
Yeah.
People are exiting America. The whole world wanted to go to America.
And that's also perhaps by design because US wants to throw out people. Look at what US is doing with South Koreans. Look at what US is doing with visa restrictions. Look at what US has done over fentanyl trade with Mexicans.
Correct.
Was US not known for importing best minds? That was one of its biggest strengths,
And,
including best
and
Indian
that
minds.
is what I think Donald Trump would ascribe to as something which has prevented US from becoming great. I mean, arguably that is the entire theory, right? But I think let's stick with the theme of who else are the contenders for Godfather, and another character which has emerged
No, I
very
think-
strongly this year.
Xi has to be Xi.
Xi.
Is it Xi or is it Putin? Look
No,
at what
Both
Xi.
of them. No, both
No,
of
no,
them.
no, no,
I
no.
mean,
To my
see,
mind, there's no doubt. It
No.
is Xi.
in recency, if I quote recency, we're news professionals. I think recency, 60 heads of states watching Chinese military parade is giving him a heads up.
Yes, so I agree. And who are the two most important VIPs in that parade display? There's Putin and there is, of course, Kim Jong-un, right?
North Korean leader.
North Korean
Yeah.
leader.
Leader,
So leader, yeah, I don't know how to designate him, leader,
Yeah.
right? But again, and leaders typically have followers, so one would
That's
argue whether he's a leader in that sense or not. But that notwithstanding, I think, why I want to stress a little more on Putin is the kind of muscle flexing Putin has done by sending drones to Poland. I think that is pretty much unprecedented since World War II, and that is something that the Polish government has also come on record to say that Putin is now testing the NATO alliance or
Exactly.
whatever is
Yes.
left of the
Yeah.
NATO alliance right now,
And-
with Donald Trump withdrawing support in some sense, theoretically
true.
withdrawing
Yeah.
support, upping the budgets of all other NATO European members, the defense budgets being upped, and Putin going ahead, sending drones, testing their response time, and my God, I mean, they scrambled, but they were unable to do much.
To answer your question, see, number one neta dunya ka kaun hai? The response, it needs certain attributes.
Yeah.
Putin is he draws enigma as a power. He's enigmatic.
Right.
And, look at his utterances versus Donald Trump. I mean, three of them, Modi, Xi, and Putin in one picture. The next morning, Trump has got, loose motions. And he starts commenting on social, and then he says, I've lost all of them.
But
to-
it's the same Trump who laid out literally the red carpet in Alaska
Absolutely.
for Putin.
No, but Putin
So at some
is-
level, is Donald Trump threatened by Putin's power? We understand economically he is threatened by the rise of Xi Jinping, the rise of China.
He is threatened
Yeah, he
by
should be.
new
I
alliances.
think-
he is threatened by, he's disrupted the entire global order for worse or good that, we'll know in a
If he's threatened by alliances, why is he the guy who's walking out of alliances like NATO? Not walking out, but at least...
No, that's a
trimming
different
down.
issue where he's saying that
that's
we've been
slightly
giving free
different.
right to NATO.
Because, see,
Why
that
should I
is-
fight your wars, is what
those
he's
are
telling,
independent
Wasn't
multilateral
that the whole
platform.
idea of NATO
Yeah.
to begin with?
No.
Yeah, but
NATO-
it was it was a vestige of the Cold War, okay, where
No, even
US
with
had
US
to
in command, even
go in
with
and
US in
protect
command,
a
but he
certain
feels that
status quo.
I mean WHO, UNICEF, NATO, he has to walk out of them to make a statement.
Yeah.
So I think Putin has played his hands better, and he will be seen as more stable. The Chinese leadership is emerging as a threat because of its
I think
economic
it's
power.
the defining leadership of this century. I think we don't have a more successful a more powerful global leader than Xi today. Let's face
Right.
it, not even an American.
And he's wedded forever.
president.
That
Yes.
land is wedded forever to a dictatorial role. It's not democratic, while his US is democratic. Even with Trump, it has to follow and adhere to certain basic standards of democracy that it preaches so violently.
Right. So I think the story moved on tariffs this week, and what we know is two posts on Truth Social by President Donald Trump, Prime Minister Modi responding to one of those, and it seems that next week is when the next round of trade negotiations are going to restart.
But when
I'm
What's
not
going
too
to
sure.
change?
I'm not too sure
I'm
because
not
they
too
also
sure.
said once India stops buying Russian oil.
Right. So what is going to change? Let's assume that trade negotiations continue, whether a US delegation comes to India or the Indian delegation travels to Washington. What can change in the next round of negotiations? Because we have our red lines very clearly drawn. We are
Exactly.
we are not going to concede any ground on agriculture, dairy, fisheries,
I see
MSMEs,
two things.
and we will continue buying Russian oil.
I think I see two changes. One is that India has already started buying, fuel from US as well. It will increase the quota. Second, the refined products that are going from India, from the imports that we make from Russia, that's a bigger irritant than the imports from Russia.
Okay.
So that, I think, if you look the larger chemistry within the corporate India and the government, there is some disturbance there in the traditional norms. I'm
Will
not getting
Europe be willing to
So the
buy
way
more
I see
expensive
it,
oil?
Karthik, is very simple. I think India is already reconciled to the worst in this trade.
Right.
Even if there's some hint in terms of, let's say, outsourcing could be impacted or exports could be impacted. I think we are reconciled to that. So I think India is going to go into this trade negotiation with a much, a stronger clarity. And they'll draw the line saying,
These are the only
we'll
two-
deal with what happens.
So farm is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
India is parallelly working, which it should expedite on improving, bringing in new ideas for both export basket, also for new economic circles like tourism, 28 billion versus 100 billion estimated. It also leads to large-scale employment. These are areas government of India has been talking about but has not been able to crack. It's time to crack these areas and then reduce dependence on such exigencies that we're facing today via US.
All right, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
and have a
Thank you.
great
Yes.
weekend.
Thank
so
you.
much,
It's a
Rakesh.
pleasure talking to you ever.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Sri.
Yes.
Have a nice weekend. And with that, it's a wrap on the weekly brief. We'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for watching.